Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel. In today's episode, we turn our attention to a case that recently concluded in a Japanese court. The conviction of an Australian woman named Donna Nelson, an alleged romance scam victim, who was found guilty of smuggling illegal drugs into Japan. The verdict and sentencing have stirred debate and raised questions about romance scams, cross-border trafficking, and the harsh realities of drug laws in foreign countries. Let's begin. Donna Nelson, a 58-year-old Australian citizen from Perth, has just been handed a 6-year prison sentence in Japan. In addition to her prison term, she's been fined 1 million yen. The conviction centers on the charge that Nelson smuggled a substantial quantity of stimulants, about 2 kilograms of phenylamminopropane, a type of amphetamine, into Japan. Japanese prosecutors had initially pushed for a far more severe punishment, 10 years in prison and a fine of 3 million yen. Considering that, Nelson's final sentence may be viewed by some as somewhat lenient. But that's only part of the story. Nelson claims she was duped. According to her testimony, she had no idea she was carrying drugs. The man she believed she was going to marry, a man she met online, allegedly convinced her to travel across continents, pick up a suitcase for him, and bring it into Japan. She says this man never appeared in person and never fulfilled the promises he made. In the end, her trust and hope for a new life were allegedly exploited, leaving her facing severe legal consequences. Let's roll back the timeline and see how this all began. In 2020, Nelson met a man online who presented himself as the owner of a successful fashion business. He claimed to be Nigerian and, according to Nelson, lived and worked in Japan. Over time, their relationship deepened into what Nelson believed to be a genuine romance. The internet, as we know, can be both a bridge and a trap. For Nelson, it seemed to have offered a chance at companionship and possibly marriage. She was 58, hopeful, and open to the idea of building a future with someone who understood her struggles and her dreams. Being an Aboriginal woman in Australia, Nelson mentioned in court how she often faced discrimination and hardship in her daily life. She stated that she didn't want to judge her new partner based on stereotypes, his nationality, his skin color, or his background. She tried to trust him, to see him as a successful businessman who cared about her. In her own words, she said that she didn't want to assume he was a scammer just because of where he came from. That trust, as we now know, may have cost her dearly. In January 2023, Nelson boarded a flight that would eventually land her at Narita International Airport, just outside Tokyo. Her journey included a stopover in Laos. This detail becomes crucial. While in Laos, she was asked by her online partner, whom we'll refer to as Kelly, the only name she knew him by, to pick up what he described as dress samples from an acquaintance. These were supposedly materials for his fashion business. Nelson was to deliver them to him in Japan, where he promised to meet her. He had paid for her initial travel arrangements, but at one point, Nelson fell ill and had to pay for her own accommodations in Laos. Doubts began creeping in. She even contemplated abandoning the trip because the situation felt off. But driven by the hope of meeting the man she loved and not wanting to appear distrustful or prejudiced, she pressed on. When Nelson arrived in Japan on January 3, 2023, customs officers at Narita Airport performed a routine inspection of her checked luggage. To her shock, and as the court later detailed, about 2 kilograms of a stimulant drug were found hidden under a false bottom in the suitcase. Arrested on the spot, Nelson was thrust into a complex legal system where drug smuggling carries severe penalties. During the trial, Nelson maintained her innocence. She said that she had no knowledge of the drugs in her suitcase and truly believed she was carrying nothing more than samples of clothing. Her defense argued that she was a victim of a romance scam, manipulated by a criminal who exploited her emotional vulnerability and desire for companionship. The narrative they presented was that Donna Nelson herself was not a hardened criminal but a pawn used by traffickers who never intended to meet her face to face. The prosecution, however, insisted that ignorance could not be an excuse. They argued that Nelson should have known something was amiss, that she should have questioned the suspicious circumstances, and that she bore responsibility for not walking away. After many sessions in the Chiba District Court, the verdict was delivered on a Wednesday. Presiding Judge Masakazu Kamakura acknowledged that Nelson had indeed been deceived. He expressed sympathy, noting that there was room for sympathy, and that she had been taken advantage of. However, he also stated that she had a feeling something was off, implying that her intuition warned her of potential wrongdoing. According to Judge Kamakura, Nelson could have stopped at any point. She could have refused to carry the suitcase or reported her suspicions. Instead, she proceeded. As a result, the court found her guilty under Japan's stimulants control and customs laws. The sentence: 6 years in prison and a fine of 1 million yen. This was a reduced sentence compared to the 10-year prison term and 3 million yen fine that prosecutors had demanded, presumably because the court recognized some degree of coercion and deception. Yet for Nelson's family, this outcome was devastating. Donna Nelson had already been in custody for almost 2 years by the time of the verdict. The court announced that 430 days of her pre-sentencing detention would count toward her prison term. Nonetheless, the prospect of an additional 6 years behind bars is grim. Outside the courthouse, Nelson's daughter, Crystal Hilaire, expressed her family's heartbreak. Hilaire maintained that her mother was always against drugs, that she despised them, and that she never would have agreed to smuggle them knowingly. For Hilaire and her siblings, this was not justice. It was a profound injustice. They vowed to fight the ruling, intending to appeal and maintain Nelson's innocence. Hilaire expressed deep concern for her mother's well-being. Donna had lost weight and was emotionally distraught. The family worried that 6 more years in a foreign prison might break her spirit. The defense lawyer, Ria Nishida, also condemned the verdict as unjust and confirmed plans to appeal. Meanwhile, the prosecutors and Japanese authorities have remained firm on their stance that drug smuggling is a severe offense that threatens public health and safety. Japan's drug laws are notoriously strict, and the legal system tends to deliver harsh sentences for narcotics offenses, even in cases where defendants claim ignorance. This case serves as a reminder that online criminals often prey on individuals who are vulnerable, seeking love, companionship, or financial stability. They manipulate emotions, build trust over months or even years, and then ask the victims to perform simple favors that turn out to be serious crimes. These scammers often maintain anonymity, provide vague details, and engineer circumstances that push victims into suspicious situations. Once the victim is apprehended by law enforcement, the scammer disappears without a trace. For many victims, the stigma and shame associated with such scams can be overwhelming. They may hesitate to come forward, fearing judgment from family, friends, or authorities. In Nelson's case, the fact that she is an Aboriginal woman who has faced discrimination may have influenced her reluctance to doubt Kelly. She didn't want to be unfair or fall into stereotyping. Tragically, her understanding and open-mindedness may have played right into the scammer's plans. From a legal standpoint, in Japan, the courts lean heavily toward the principle that ignorance is no excuse for breaking the law. While the judge in Nelson's case did acknowledge her being deceived, he also emphasized personal responsibility. The sympathy granted by the court reduced her sentence, but not enough to free her. What's next for Donna Nelson? Her defense team has vowed to appeal, which might mean a longer legal battle, more court sessions, and no immediate relief for her or her family. Appeals can take considerable time, during which Nelson remains incarcerated. Her family, as they've stated, intends to fight until she can return home. The emotional and financial toll on her loved ones is enormous, and the uncertainty of the appeals process will undoubtedly weigh heavily on them. This case serves as a warning for anyone forming relationships online, especially those that lead to requests for international travel and transporting items across borders. The lesson is as heartbreaking as it is clear. Even if your intentions are pure, trust and love can be weaponized by criminals. Thank you for joining us today. If you found this coverage insightful, please like this video and consider subscribing for more true crime stories from Japan. Stay informed, stay cautious, and we'll see you next time.